So I wanted to show you how I edit my photos, and I have already put this image into Lightroom. I do this all with all my images. I put import into Lightroom, I put a base preset on, I do minor tweaks, mainly exposure and any kind of distortion kind of transform that I need to do, just because I find in Photoshop, when I'm using the crop tool or trying to, kind of get back the distortion, it doesn't work as easy in Photoshop, and I find the tools much better in Lightroom. So, for instance, this image, this bench, the original image, the bench, I kind of was at the side, so the bench was a bit of at an angle. So yeah, I kind of just distorted it to take it back to, so this is straight now, which is why, as you can see over here, there's a little bit of I've kind of cropped the canvas a bit, so I'll have to figure that out in a little while. So yeah, this is the image I've done a few times. I call it Hazel's Bench now, and throughout the seasons, this kind of foliage comes and goes and does lots of different things throughout the year, and it's just a nice kind of series I have been doing, and yeah, and it's just a nice way of showing her kind of growing up, and I'll show you side by side some of the previous ones we've done. But I took one of her last year in the same place, and she could barely get up on the bench, so it's quite nice that that I've got these kind of different moments in her life on this bench. So okay, so I put it into Photoshop and I create a layer. You have to bear with, my Photoshop can be a bit of a pain. So, and then I always go into camera raw filter because I like to tweak a few things before I even get started, and then I can see my clipping of my shadows and my highlights, because we like to kind of start and get the kind of exposure right if I can. And it's going to be really slow because I always seem to have updates going on or something crazy. Come on. The colour wheel of death, as I like to call it. Here we go. So I go to basic, I double check. As you can see, my blacks are clipped here, which is fine because usually I can just bring it up in curves and see it goes up there a little bit. You don't have to. Some people like to have the blacks clipped and or the highlights not so much, but you can always bring it up. And I just think, because I've got an editorial background, I quite like to have it quite exposed correctly. Now sometimes I don't, but it's kind of personal preference. So what I like to do is, I feel like this is quite dark, and she's quite bright. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the exposure down a little bit, just because I want her to be quite well exposed. Now the preset I have used on this in Lightroom, I currently use Soulmate preset, so small. I do love them. They've recently done an update on their old presets, which were actually a little bit more matte. So by matte, I mean, for instance, if you was to bring up the curves, like here, you can see how matte it is. They used to be a lot like that. Now they're quite dark and punchy, which is definitely my style. But even that said, I love the presets. I would recommend them for anyone who wants to, batch edit stuff. But I am forever tweaking my own, whatever preset I use. I'm always tweaking. So I'm currently working on my own, but for most part, I just use Soulmate because it's a great base. And then I do my own kind of edits. So yeah, so what I'll do is I've just brought that down. One thing I do love in both Lightroom and Photoshop is I love these filters. Linear is great I usually use that on skies, and radial I'll use on something like this. So for instance, if we click a radial, create new mask. Oh, I've done that already. Bear with, just giving it something to, no, it's detecting a sky now. Whoops. Can't think and talk at the same time. Right, here we go. So I've got the radial mask, and you can just select a part of the image that you want to do something to or you don't want to. So for instance, I've selected hazel here. What you can then do is you can invert it here, and then it will mean that you'll do it outside of the circle, which is just brilliant. So if you want to bring up the exposure, you can see, and it just leaves her exposed really well. So what I'll do is I'll do a little bit of exposure and a bit of the shadows. As you can see, that's kind of bringing it out at the back now. And you can always use the kind of brush it on and brush it off. So, but if we look at the before and after, you can see it's just brought it out quite nicely. But then we can go back here and just go back to the curves and bring it up a little bit. There we go. So that's what I'll do to begin with, and I'll just leave that a minute. And we'll come back to the main screen, and we'll start working on our first layer when it applies it. Okay, so what I like to first do is get rid of this line, which, you know, you can, there's a number of ways you can do it. You can use a clone stamp. You can use this kind of spot healing tool. Oh, it's going crazy. Of course, when I want to do an editing video, my computer goes crazy. Right, let's go back. Right, let's reduce this. And we're just going to drag that over here, and it should do it quite nicely. See? Perfect. You know, people underestimate the kind of the spot healing tool, but sometimes it's just brilliant. And like, for instance, like over here, well, my colour wheels being a pain. See what I have to deal with. My iMac is really like not up to date, and my particular iMac has been known for just being a pain, and you know, this is why nobody gets this one anymore, just because it just, you can't upgrade it, and it just goes really, really slow. And then, you know, if you've got like Lightroom and Photoshop all working at the same time, it just crashes. It's just a nightmare. So I don't recommend getting it. Right, I might have to pause this a minute because this is doing my head in. Come on. And also, because I'm recording, it slows down as well. So basically, I'm trying to record and it won't let me. Right, it's working again now. So what I'll do is I'll get rid of this, I don't know what this is on here. Oh, it's mucking up again. I'm never going to be able to teach, am I? Because I can't even get my computer to work. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of this using spot healing tool when it works. It's going to be a pain for me today. Pretty good. So yeah, I'll just do my kind of, you know, spot healing, get rid of, you know, little things that I find distracting. And then we'll work on little things like, to be honest, I can see it's actually quite green, so I might go back into camera filter and just play around with the tint. White balance is always a pain for me. I do, when I remember, try take a grey card with me, but sometimes it just doesn't happen. So I'm forever kind of playing around with the colour because I can't see them very well at all. I'm not colourblind, but I do have issues with seeing, tint, and whether an image is too orange or blue. It's just it's just my eyes. But I have to usually compare it to another image that I know is correctly coloured, and then I'll compare it and I'll be like, oh yeah, of course it is. Of course it's too green, too pink or whatever. I do like my images a little bit more on the magenta side, particularly in my skin tones, I've noticed. But I'm always developing, and I always I try not to beat myself up too much because we're all on a journey. So as you can see, it was a bit green, and I've just updated that now. And then we will go into colour balance, which is my favourite thing to play around with. I'll start introducing some, kind of colours into the shadows. If there is a bit of these small presets, they do leave a little bit of kind of almost like a red kind of highlight overlay almost. So I like to kind of, put a bit more blue back in when it lets me. Okay, come on, let's go. So I'll create another colour balance layer, and then I'll just start playing around with the sliders. And yeah, so you can see it's quite red, and I'll just do small little tweaks because I think smaller is better. So sometimes the shadows, it depends on the kind of mood, but I do like red shadows, particularly for autumn time. But as you can see, when you put reds and the blues in, it makes it darker again, and that will be clipped in the black. So you have to be aware of that. So let's see before and after. Hasn't made too much of a difference really, but put a bit more blue in there. And what I also like to do as I'm going along is I like to look at pictures I've done before that I like and that I know are correct, and I'm quite happy with the colours. So I always bring another JPEG in and compare it so that I know that I'm going to have a consistent kind of image with the rest of my work. I've done this with other people's work as well. So if I aspire to have images like someone else, I will screenshot a picture of theirs and I'll bring it in and I'll see how to get the greens the same, or their tones the same. So as you can see, my greens on the bench image are quite yellow compared to the ones on the right. They've got more of an olivey tone, so we'll work on those in a bit. So what I'm going to do now is, because it's I'm going to go back to this layer. You can see this quite brown on the bottom, and I kind of want to get rid of it. So there's a few ways I'll play around with this. I will get the brush tool, I'll go to colour, and I'll reduce this down to about 20 on opacity. Yeah, it's only going to 19. And then flow about the same, bring it down. And then I will option click, colour pick it from there, and I'll zoom in when it goes. And I will just start colouring on there when it will let me. This might be too brown, to be honest, which is fine. I don't think And then I'll just colour pick from around the areas and then just colour it in, and then you'll be able to see before and after if it will go. Oh. Oh, it's being a right pain. No, I don't think that's working. So, okay, I'm just going to get rid of this stick because I don't like it. I don't mind our little bag there really, but I'll just get rid of all these little bits. Luckily there's not too much rubbish. I thought there might be. A little bit of bird poop up here. Get rid of that. So, quite happy with it so far. I think I'm forever tweaking, so I'm going to go over here a minute and I'm going to go to hue and saturation. You can also use the curves to change colours, but I find that I do quite like the hue layer. So you can either click green or yellow, or you can colour pick it so you know you're getting the right kind of colours. So I always kind of desaturate the greens a little bit. If I go right down, you can see it goes really kind of very jewelled, and that's very yellow the other side. So I like to go a little bit down, not too much, and I like to bring up the blues sometimes. There we go, let's see what that looks like. And then with the yellows, I will desaturate again. And then the only issue is if you do use this hue saturation layer, it will do everything. So if you've got other colours in there, you'll have to remove it or only do the layer on the stuff that you want to change. So, okay, let's have a look at that. That's a bit better. So what I'll do is I'll use the pen tool and brush tool, sorry, and then I'll up the opacity and the flow and just make sure that I haven't got it on the body and the bench. Although that bench does look quite green, doesn't it? Here we go. And then it'll just be the greenery around it. Just looking quite nice. So I'm just going to compare it to before. I mean, different greens will make different things, so it kind of depends on what your aims are. I think I'm also going to go back to here and I'm going to warm it up a little bit because I still think it's quite cool. Just a smidge. As you see, because I've done that, it's unclipped the backs, I find. Right, it's looking really nice now, and I'm just going to go back a minute because I just think it's still quite bright, and I didn't realise how bright it was there. This is the issue when you have like quite dark backdrops and then a really bright kind of light source. That this was just dense kind of wood, as you saw from the video, and above was just sky, and it was a really bright day, but just had the massive like cloud finally that came. So it just acts like a massive softbox, but with a really harsh light. As you can see, it's not as in focus as I wanted it to be. I'm having some issues with my Sigma, but it's good enough. It's good enough for what I want to do. What was I doing? Oh yeah, I was going to check. So as you can see, if you go over to the highlights and drop your, your magnifying tool on it, you can see over here the numbers, and they're quite high in the red channel, and they're meant to be, I think any more than that and they'll be quite blown. So you just kind of bring down the whites, one of the highlights as well, and there it is, slightly better. Let's zoom out, let's see what's going on. I could just tell it was a bit too bright. I'm going to bring up the curves again. Yeah, that looks much better. Yes. I've kind of lost a bit of vibrancy now, as I can see from the, it's looking pretty good. And it's also a little bit matte, so as you can see, I always go back to Camera Raw. I find it, really easy to play around with. So I'll just bring the shadows down a little bit for a bit more contrast, and then I'll see if you do too much of the, that was the saturation one. If you do too much vibrancy, then it will clip the blacks again, but that'll do. So I'm pretty happy with the edit now. I think that I will just continue doing a lot more tweaks, really. I'm just like that. But overall, you can see how, I do my edits. But comparing it, I'm quite happy with the greens. I'll kind of zoom in and kind of, on a picture where she's got her face, I will look at the skin tones. Because I do like to kind of make sure that the skin tones are consistent as much as I can. Sometimes if I want to, I will sharpen an image up, and I'll do this by clicking on the layer that I want, and do like a smart sharpen, where you can get rid of motion blur or lens blur. Some people do high pass filter, but these images are just for me mainly, so I don't like to over sharpen them. And yeah, so what I end up doing is I'll end up saving it as a PSD as it is, not flattening any of the layers. I will save it here as is, and then I will flatten the image. I always actually go to my file info, and I will, when it comes up, I will name the image and include everything for the metadata. So I'll just put the name, my name. I'll write the description. I won't do it now, but you write, what you can see in the image, everything that's specific. So little girl climbing up on a bench wearing a burgundy, pink dress and, brown shoes. And then keywords that kind of like hashtags, kind of for your, your kind of target market or your area or whatever you want in there. And then, your copyright status and your website. This is great for, everyone should be doing your metadata to kind of optimize for your website. And, so people can see who the image belongs to if they come across it. And, just so that, you have copyright over your own images. It's just useful to do this. So I'll do that in a bit. And then I will always resize my image. I'll go to here and I will always size it alongside 2048 or whatever size I want to do for whatever website, but usually 2048 pixels on the long side and automatically change the height, and then when I save it, oh, you have to change the mode. Oh, bear with. You have to change the mode to 8 bits because it won't export as a JPEG otherwise. I don't know if your Photoshop is the same, but it was a new kind of feature that I am not happy with. So it's a JPEG, Rowan 3, I'll save it, and I'll always save it to around or under 400 kilobytes. There we go. Oh no, that's 5. Yeah, so that's perfect, and I'll just save it. And then that's perfect for putting on websites and Instagram. There we go.